The P-38 Lightning, ladies and gentlemen. Very good.
From Muskogee, of all places. Oh, he's from Muskogee.
Beautiful, the P-38.
The colors go in opposite
P-25 was flying, but the engines were the propellers rotating in the same direction. That is not the case in the Lockheed design. They're counter-rotating propellers, and it makes it very stable, and it purrs when it goes by. Listen to that. Tricycle landing gear of the Lightning. Beautiful landing too, Larry. Well done, and of course Connie with her hands pulled out, the tail trigger. All that horsepower, 51.
One of the things that happened in the P-38, he was the first ace of his group, got 5. One of the things that happened in the P-38, he was the first ace of his group, got 5. On the days that he actually got the 5th, I think he got 3 that day. And he ran into trouble. He shot down 1, and then the fuel ran out on one side. He'd forgotten to fix the tanks. And he was fussing with it, and they were surrounded by Germans that day. And then the second engine conked out. And so as he was going down, he had a guy in his sights, and he fired, and he got that guy. And so he became the first guy, maybe the only fighter pilot to ever shoot down another plane while in glide mode.
As the men and women who served in World War II pass away, many of their children continue to tell their stories. Christina Oles is the daughter of Triple Ace and Air Force legend General Robin Oles, who served as a fighter pilot in a combat career that spanned from World War II through the Vietnam War.
On their mission that day was to protect the ships coming in and the guys landing in case the Luftwaffe came up. That was their orders. They were to engage the enemy. That was it when they were flying. Well, what happened was the Luftwaffe never came up that day. And so the boys who were flying cover for the guys were flying along the beaches over and over and over again. And my dad said, it was a nightmare for years that he could see the whites of the eyes of the Germans firing down on the kids on the beach, and their orders were not to fire on the guys behind the machine guns on the cliff. And he said he thinks they could have saved thousands of lives that day. It was just a nightmare for the rest of his life about that.
Christina Oles was close to her father throughout his life. She served as co-author of his widely acclaimed book, Fighter Pilot. She'll tell us about the colorful life of this independent American hero at this year's Warbirds in Review.
It is such a privilege to be here with all of you so that we, all of us together, can share honoring our aviator veterans who have done so much to protect our freedoms, our active duty military, including the civilians now who maintain these airplanes so that we can maintain this history. So it's a privilege being with you today. The P-38 to the right, Connie just mentioned Ron and Diane Fagan from Minnesota. They are giant supporters of EAA and Warbirds in Review. Please welcome Ron Fagan and his son Evan. Ron and Evan, would you come out, please? Yeah. Ron, good morning. Evan, morning. Ron, where'd this come from? You have this incredible museum. It is an incredible museum up in Minnesota. Where'd the idea come from?
Well, actually, we started restoring warbirds and you know, building a pretty good inventory, and people kept coming there to get to see them. And one day we thought, somebody said, well, you should just have a museum because people are just constantly coming to see them. So that's where Diane and I and Aaron got the idea, well, let's build a building, let's try to gear it up a little bit, notch her up, and to make a museum, and that's kind of how it started in 2012, Evan, I think. 2012 is when we opened it.
So this P-38, Evan, you're the P-38 guy, right?
Yep.
So tell us about this airplane.
Well, I actually just started flying it in April, and you know, the history of the airplane, my dad could probably tell you better, but he bought it from Stephen Gray in 2007, I believe, yep. 2004. And it was restored in 2007, and the Fagan Fighters Group, it was a flying airplane when it came here. It was ferried into Granite Falls. They went through all the systems, new electrical, and replaced a lot of hydraulic, and we painted it as rough stuff, which it flew for a number of years until just recently we saw that it needed paint, and we thought there was no better P-38 to paint it other than SCAT, which is Robin Old's P-38. We know I think there's 3 or 4 P-38s under restoration now. We figure we better get SCAT on there before someone else does.
Yeah, right. What is it like for you as a young man to fly this World War II airplane, especially the way you've configured it?
Well, it's an honor to fly it. Just to get to be around these has been an honor. But you know, SCAT is in Robin Old's. You know, and I'm sure most of you have read his book. It's a pretty amazing life the guy had. Quite an American, and having an airplane with his name on it is an honor in its own. But P-38 for our family also takes a special meaning because my grandpa was on the 4th Infantry, first wave of Utah Beach, and always talked about how his group was pinned down and 2 P-38s came down and shot all the Germans, and he said he survived due to the P-38. So to get to fly the airplane, pretty big honor.
Ron Fagan, Evan Fagan, thank you, gentlemen, very much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
You know, it's really impossible because Robin was such a larger-than-life guy to cover, you know, the expanse of his life in a brief period. But a few more details besides what you saw up there on the screen just now. He wasn't only a great fighter pilot, he was hugely respected and admired as a warrior, and he was a leader. Triple ace over 2 wars, World War II and Vietnam, 16 air victories flying the P-38, the P-51 Mustang, and the F-4 Phantom. Historians regard Robin as having been the best wing commander in the entire Vietnam War. He flew our early jets, in fact, was part of the very first acrobatic demo team for the Air Force. He was highly decorated, of course, Silver Star, 3 oak leaf clusters, Distinguished Flying Cross with 5 oak leaf clusters, Air Medal, 39 oak leaf clusters, and many more, including decorations from France and the British. He was inducted in the Aviation Hall of Fame in 2001. He is the only inductee in the National Aviation Hall of Fame who was also inducted in the College Football Hall of Fame because he had been an All-American at West Point. Christina Olds is his daughter. We'll hear from her in just a moment. But first, welcome John Geyer. John, come on out. John, 22-year veteran, Air Force fighter pilot, flew the F-4 with Robin in the Triple Nickel Squadron in Vietnam. John Geyer. Take the next one. Yeah, thanks. To put Robin here. Now, Robin, she has a BA in English and creative writing from Vassar. She was super close to her dad and completed his autobiography, which many of you have, again, probably read, Fighter Pilot, The Memoirs of a Legendary Ace Robin Olds, and know that if you have not read this book, it is almost impossible to put down. Here's here's Christina Olds. You love me calling you Robin? Nice name. Morning, Christina.
Good morning, everyone.
What was given what a take charge guy your dad was in every way, personally, personal responsibility, all that. How surprised are you that and what was your relationship with him that allowed him to say to you, okay, you can finish my memoirs?
Well, I knew for years and years and years I'd end up having to do his book for him, because when he started writing notes in 1985, he would send them to me in the mail for comments. We did that back and forth for many, many years. But what really happened is when I started traveling to air shows with him basically in 2001, people would come up to me and say, please make him write his memoirs, please make him write that book. And that's when I began to understand how important it was that his stories would get out there. But in the meantime, all these guys who were authors, established authors, military authors, had offered to him to help him write his book, and he always said, hell no, I won't put the rest of the words out there.
Including Clancy.
Yeah, Tom Clancy came out to Steamboat Springs and sat in his living room and begged him to let him help him write his biography, and my dad said, nope, nope, nope. But it was about a week before he passed away. I was his only caregiver for his last 6 months, and a week before he passed away, he said, I am so mad at myself for not getting that book done. I said, Daddy, don't worry. I've always known I'd end up writing your book for you. And he said, you will? Do you promise? I said, absolutely. He said, all right, young lady, that's an order. And then he apologized for leaving me such a mess, and it was a mess. I had about 24 banker's boxes full of loose papers. We found papers in boxes under the bed, in the closet. Nothing was organized. Nothing was chronological. He did 3 pages on one memory, 2 pages on another memory, 5 pages on another memory. And so I had to put it all in chronological order, and there were huge holes in the stories. And then I did a lot of research and interviewing the pilots that flew with him to fill in all the blanks. And I wove all the stories together in the book and then added the ones that I knew. And you can imagine the stories I had to leave out. I mean, literally, it could have been a 1,000-page book, and my publisher said, no, no. So it was a labor of love. I'm so glad to have gotten it done. And the greatest joy for me is I thought when I was doing it, I'm giving my dad a gift because I want him to really be known by people in the world. Well, what has happened is the gift really came to me from him. Because of the book, I've had this amazing new family. The whole aviation world is now my family, and I just can't get enough of it. I love being here so much.
How good a writer was he? I mean, he's
Fabulous.
West Point grad, really.
Oh, he was he really was a Renaissance man. He was classically trained. We have the same sort of classic education, and is a brilliant, brilliant writer, a poet. In fact, a lot of people don't know that. He was also an artist, a very amazing cartoonist, caricature. I have over 500 of his original drawings that I'm trying to pull together now in a fun little book for pilots. Very irreverent, politically incorrect, great stuff, as you can imagine.
What was talk about him at West Point and the kind of guy he was even in those years in terms of duty honor country?
Well, he was very much duty honor country. Talk about the ultimate patriot. But he was also a renegade, you know, which made him loved. He had to march a lot of tours at West Point because
What did he do to get that?
Well, I'm not going to say. He actually was marching tours right up until the day of graduation. He marched his last tour half an hour before the graduation parade, and then had to run to join the graduation. So, but he was a real lover of life. You know, he gathered all the people together to have fun all the time. They had football matches in the hallways after lights, things like that. You know, little things you're not supposed to do.
Yeah, exactly. What was he like in terms of speaking truth to power?
Truth to power.
Like to people in huge authority, if he disagreed with something they were doing, if they outranked him by a bunch.
Well, he would say a lot of things under his breath. I remember sitting next to him at banquets when somebody would be up speaking blah, 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 and Daddy would be going, bullshit, you know. And I'd have to elbow him, kick him under the table. You know, he had tremendous respect for the people that he respected, that he thought were making the correct decisions and giving the correct orders. But he also was duty honor country to the point that he obeyed his superiors, even if he disagreed with them. If he totally disagreed, he would find a way to accomplish the mission, but kind of do it in a roundabout way, you know, his way. But he never outright disobeyed a direct order, except for when they tried to make him take his mustache off before the end of the war.
Right. Well, let's go to that. Let's talk about that. When came back from Vietnam, right? Superintendent.
No, he was a commandant.
Oh, commandant, excuse me.
Air Force Academy.
Commandant at the Air Force Academy. Now, what happened that day when he first appeared?
Well, what happened, let's back up first. I'll tell you why he grew that mustache. It was right after Bolo. You'll notice all the photos of Operation Bolo. He didn't have the mustache. I love that. But in the middle of January, after Bolo, he started growing this mustache. And he grew it, and he grew it, and he grew it out of limits. It was way out to here, way over his lip.
Now, this was when, 67,
67,
yeah.
January. And so he grew it, and the generals in Washington started saying, take it off, you're a bad influence. Well, Robin wanted to be that influence on the pilots. He wanted them to know that there was a renegade leader who was taking care of them and not really listening to Washington. So that mustache became the symbol, and I hope General Welsh isn't in the audience here, became the symbol of Robin Old's single-digit salute to Washington, D.C. throughout the war. But when he came home, and it was in LBJ's office the day after he came home, and LBJ said, so Colonel, tell me, how do you think it's going over there? And my dad said, sir, with all due respect to you as my commander-in-chief, get us the hell out of this goddamn war. And Johnson said, well, son, how do you expect me to do that? And Robin said, it's simple, just win it. We can win it right now, get all those boys home, just win it. And of course that didn't happen, but so he went to brief the chiefs of staff right after LBJ meeting, and it was then when General McConnell came up to him, stuck his finger under his nose and said, take it off, take it off. So he shaved off his mustache, arrived at the Air Force Academy, all shiny and new as a commandant. First thing he saw on his desk was the cadets had painted 4 stars on his chair, representing the MiGs he had shot down, knowing that he was going to have to fly that desk for 4 years. Then, when he went to make his first speech in Mitchell Hall, which is the big dining hall there, all 4,000 cadets had fake mustaches on. And they wear them to this day whenever I'm there. The class of 2011 voted him as their exemplar, so they had the name Olds on their shoulder for 4 years. And so I was in Colorado during those 4 years, got to hang out with the kids a lot. And every time I was at the academy, every cadet has a fake mustache on, even the girls. And last year, General Mark Welsh, who's Air Force Chief of Staff, sanctioned Mustache March across the active Air Force for everyone to start growing their mustaches on the 1st of March in honor of Robin Olds. And that was a real thrill for me when that article came out.
Wow. John, you flew with him. You were there.
Yes, sir.
And flew in Robin's squadron?
I did.
Did you hear him?
Robin, of course, was a wing commander, and the Triple Nickel was one of the squadrons he commanded. And I have flown in the missions which he led, and a couple of them was into the Hanoi area. Quite exciting. But when he stood up and started briefing the troops, we were 100% behind him. Wherever he would lead us, we would follow.
You know, when I said earlier that historians say that he was the best wing commander in the Vietnam War, how accurate is that from your point of view of being with him, actually flying with him?
Well, he would always tell us, I will take care of you guys. I hope you take care of me. And he meant it. If we had any trouble, for instance, one time I had a motorbike on base at Ubon, Thailand. And I didn't have the safety inspections. I just forgot to go in to get the safety inspection that the Air Force requires. So I got a ticket. I went to the security police and I said, why are you giving pilots tickets for simple things like this? Don't we have enough to be concerned about? Flying missions, losing airplanes, and so on and so forth. This is ridiculous. And I said, I think I'll just tell my boss. Well, he knew who my boss was. Look, he tore up that ticket. He knew that he didn't want to answer to Robin Olds.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and he was really famous for taking care of his guys, and he loved the ground crews so much, too. And one thing he would do, and he learned this from his father, is every time he'd arrive at a new assignment, the first thing he'd do be throw his bags in the BOQ and walk out and meet everyone. He'd go to the barbershop at the hospital, the commissary, the BX. He would take a 6-pack of beer out on the flight line and talk to the crews working on the planes at 2 o'clock in the morning. And he'd say, you guys tell me what you need, tell me what you want, what problems you have. I'm going to take care of everything. You can count on me. I've got your back. And I heard from a crew chief just yesterday who came up and told me that what was amazing is when Robin would come talk to them and ask them what they needed, they'd say, we need parts. We can't fix this or that because we don't have the parts. Next thing they knew it's 3 or 4 days later, a package would arrive from Utah or Washington, D.C. or Texas with exactly the parts that they needed. That's what he did. He was really hands-on with the men that worked for him.
When he first took over the wing, Christina, what were the early missions he flew? How did he inject himself in terms of flying in those early missions?
Were you there when he arrived?
No, I came a little
Well, it's
later.
sort of legendary. When he arrived at Ubon, the morale was really low. The 105s had been shot down over and over and over again. They'd been losing F-4s. The missions had been designed in Washington, D.C. on the desks of people there, and guys were flying the way they were told to fly, and it was just miserable. And the bases were all squabbling with each other. Da Nang and Karat and Ubon, the pilots were just quibbling away with each other. And he came on board. He walked into that first pilot briefing, and the guys were just sitting there going, oh, man, we've got another commander, this old guy. Now what are we going to deal with? And he walked to the front of the room, and the way Robin would always start a speech is he'd stand there very silently, and he would stare at people. And he'd say, I'm a fighter pilot. And then he said to that group, he said, all right, you guys, you better teach me well, because I'm going to be leading you in 3 weeks. I'm going to lead every mission north. And in the crowd, one young guy said, oh, yeah, right. And Robin looked right at him and said, you are going to be my wingmen. And that turned out to be J.B. Stone, who flew with him in Bolo and helped Robin design Operation Bolo. But within 2 weeks, he was leading them north. And he flew 152 combat missions during his time there. You're only supposed to fly 100 before you go home. But the way he handled that is he'd go in the ops room at night and erase his missions off the board. He'd be down at number 89, and he'd make it down to 82 and get up to 91 and suddenly be 87, and he'd erase them until that very last week when he filled it all in for 152 combat missions.
Tell us about what he said to the junior pilots, obviously junior to him, and that he would fly their wing early on in order to learn.
Right, yes. He had them lead him and follow their example up over Route Pack 6. So he let the young guys teach him all the way.
Wow. John, Bolo, Christina's mentioned Bolo. What was Bolo?
Bolo was an operation to deceive the North Vietnamese pilots. Could have been Russian pilots too, flying North Vietnamese planes. It was to deceive them and trick them into thinking that the whole force was F-105s, the thuds, going in on a strike mission. Now, they were very unequal to the agility they needed to fight in an air dogfight with the MiGs.
Yeah, the 105s.
The 105s could not tangle because they just weren't designed that way.
And that's why the MiGs knew they could come up and get the 105s.
Exactly, and they thought these were all 105s on that Bolo day. They were all F-4s from all the bases in Thailand.
How did he do that? I mean,
well, he had to get cooperation from headquarters, and he designed with the wing commanders at the other bases, got them all together and said, look, we need to deny the North Vietnamese the airspace superiority that they have had. Let's just take them all out in one day. And he did.
So by masking, in other words, pretending to be thuds?
Yes.
Yeah, they flew in the same formation that the 105s flew in. They changed their call signs. They changed the radar configuration. They changed the armament. They came in just as the 105s did every day, day after day after day, which was so predictable that the MiGs knew to come up. And so when they got up there, and Robin was number one, and it was every flight was named a car: Olds, Rambler, Lincoln, Ford, and he was Olds 1. And when they first got up there, the MiGs didn't come up at first, and then they came up. And then they knocked down 7 of them that day, which was about a third of the North Vietnamese Air Force at that time. And then they didn't come up again for 4 months. They had to regroup.
Yep. It destroyed their morale, and they didn't have enough airplanes, I guess, to put in the air. So after that, we flew a different formation. A lot of times the F-4s were flying cover. We call it MiG cover for the thuds, or the 105s. The 105s would go in low. We would cover them from a couple thousand, maybe 5,000, 6,000 feet above them. Going into Hanoi area, there are a lot of targets of opportunity, you might say. These are AAA, anti-aircraft artillery shells coming up. They had 37s, they had all kinds of rounds that would explode like a grenade explodes in the air, 8, 10, 11, 12,000 feet. Well, the MiG caps that mostly I flew on, we had to develop an altitude that would be above where this layer of shrapnel would be laid, but below where the SAM missiles were a threat. A SAM missile is just a telephone pole, looks like a telephone pole coming up from the ground, very slow at first, and accelerates tremendously as it gets altitude. About 10,000 feet, it's going pretty fast. But if you can see it when it's launched, it won't hit you. This is a fighter pilot. If you can see it, you can miss it. But if you don't see it, then you're in trouble. So we would fly between, say, about 15 to about 10,000 feet. That was the MiG cap altitude normally. The biggest threat for fighters in that era was to have an overcast. You couldn't see the missiles coming up. You couldn't see the radar-guided AAA coming up. You'd fly right through it. And the MiGs, and another threat would be an overcast of, say, 20,000 feet. The MiGs would fly above it. You didn't see them. And they would dive down, almost supersonic, and hit the tail end Charlies of the squadrons. One day, just as an example, I was flying along in a 4-ship. I was number 2, and number 3 and number 4 were around me, and I looked over, and my wingman had been hit by an air-to-air missile from a MiG. I saw the MiG go up into the clouds. I looked over, and he was going down in flames. This is in North Vietnam, and we didn't see any parachutes, so it exploded probably without the opportunity to eject. but we never knew what happened to them. They could have been killed or killed when they hit the ground, or who knows. But we came back from that mission and marked the point where he was shot, where that airplane was shot down, but never heard anything from it.
What were the attrition rates for the F-4s?
For me, David, I believe in my squadron, we had a full squadron going from Eglin, the first full squadron to go into combat. And from Eglin, we lost 25%. That was the attrition rate in the triple nickel. So it was pretty high.
But that was better than the Thud attrition rates.
Oh, they were higher. That's right.
Boy.
And they lost a lot of Thuds. That's right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Christina, listening to, I mean, we're talking about Vietnam now, but your dad's family experience goes back when, to the 20s?
Well, my grandfather, Major General Robert Olds, was an amazing character in his own right. He was a World War I fighter pilot. In those days, they were called pursuit pilots. He flew in France. He was an instructor pilot after that. Later in his career, he was the very first commander of the first squadron of B-17s in Langley. He flew the B-17s back and forth across the country. He was Billy Mitchell's aide all the way through that court-martial. He was Curtis LeMay's commander. He was a major general, died at the age of 47, and when he was commander of the 2nd Bomb Group, it just exhausted. In fact, he died a month before my dad graduated from West Point, and Daddy dedicated his commission to him.
Tell about your grandfather dressing up young Robin Olds in Washington that day.
Dressing him up?
In the Air Force uniform when he was 3 years old.
Oh, I didn't know about that. You know about?
You didn't?
No.
Oh, yeah, it was
to
because
add
he
that.
was supporting Billy Mitchell, who was being blasted by the government because of things he wanted to do. But apparently your grandfather dressed up your dad in a little, Army Air Corps uniform, and at the age of 3 took him to these meetings and the court-martial. Oh, wow, there's something you don't know about your
No,
dad.
I love it.
Wow,
And I've just started working on my grandfather's biography, so I'll definitely have to research that and put it in there.
We'll pull it out.
All right.
Back to Vietnam. Chappie James. Who was Chappie James?
Chappie James. So Chappie was Daddy's vice wing commander in England at Bentwaters at the 81st TAC Fighter Wing. I grew up with Chappie's sons. We were riding bikes up and down the streets in Bentwaters, and then Robin invited him over to be his vice wing commander at Ubon, and came over, and Chappie's just an amazing guy. He wasn't known to be the greatest fighter pilot in the world, but he was the greatest people person there ever was. I mean, and so the two of them called themselves, and it's politically incorrect now, but they were widely known as Black Man and Robin. And they were proud of that, too. And then, of course, Chappie went on to be our first African-American 4-star general in Washington, D.C. Just an astonishingly wonderful man.
Let's back up again. We heard just briefly in the film up front about your dad flying P-38s on D-Day and that period. Talk to that, would you?
Well, I will. And in fact, I brought my dad's World War II diary with me. I never travel with this because it's quite fragile now, but I thought I would read the part that he wrote on D-Day out loud. And David's going to have to hold the microphone for me.
Yep. Good to go. Wow. Oh, and that's his handwriting.
Yep. Amazing.
Oh, wow. Look at the handwriting. Wow. You ready?
Yeah. All right. This, then, was the long-awaited D-Day. Our job consisted of close-in escort of the boats, and a tremendous sight it was. As far as the eye would reach, the Straits of Dover were covered by every conceivable type of vessel. From small landing boats to huge battleships, the invasion force lay stretched out under us. I hope to never be privileged again to have to see such an amazing sight for such a show. The air support was marvelously worked out, and though from our patrol sector little was to be seen of it, our ships, airplanes that is, covered thousands of square miles. To my knowledge, not a single boat out of that vast armada was lost through German air action. already we have set up landing strips in the Cherbourg Peninsula, and the boys in the 9th Air Force are using them as of noon today. All right, I'm just back from another patrol. He actually flew 3 missions on D-Day. Just back from another patrol. The thing really is moving now. From our positions, we would see the motherships discharge troops into the landing barges, watch the barges crawl in an orderly formation through the smoke-laden shore, and then finally disappear in the murk of dust, smoke, and explosions. All the while, the battleships are pouring in their heavy stuff. We could easily follow the progress of our troops by watching where the big shells from our ships hit. God, I would hate to be a German soldier down there. Not one of their beloved Luftwaffe came up to bother us. It must be terrible for them to look up into the sky and see thousands and thousands of our planes lazily patrolling back and forth, to see thousands more come over to lay their eggs and to feel the blast of the unit's ground strafing. But the devils have asked for it, and they are certainly getting what they asked for. The worst part of that day for me was soundlessly watching the guys fall into the surf and blood pooling around them. Why have we been ordered not to fire on the Germans firing down on the beaches? Damn it, I could see the whites of their eyes. Disobeying that order was the hardest thing I've ever thought about doing.
Wow.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Can you zoom in on that? Are you zooming in on that? Can you? Yeah.
Oh, and so out of his squadron, 26 guys went over in the squadron, 9 came home.
Wow. And what a writer. Good.
Beautiful, right? So now you can see how, parts of the book, I think 60% of the words in the book are my dad's and 40% are mine, weaving it all together. He was a brilliant writer, beautiful writer.
John, you brought a couple of framed pieces out there. What are they? What do they represent?
This is a picture of the F-4 that I flew, and when we leave, they usually have all the squadron mates sign in the framework of the F-4. And another very coveted emblem was our final mission patch. This is one from the Triple Nickel Squadron. There were a number of squadrons in the 8th TAC Fighter Wing, but this is what we got on our final mission. Usually, the final mission, you're met at the airplane with a bottle of champagne, and you toast to the other guys that are around, and then you go to the club, and that day is the only day you're proud to wear your hat in the officers' club. What that means is if you wear your hat in an officers' club, you buy a round of drinks for everybody there. But we're proud to buy everybody drinks on that day.
Wow. God. And Christina, the jacket you got? Yeah.
This is my dad's flight jacket from Vietnam. And it's got his 100 missions patch right there.
Yep.
It's Yankee Air Pirate.
Yep.
Look familiar, John.
Yep, sure does. Got one just like it. Yeah.
Wow. Back to the...
I also wear his ring, his West Point ring. I had it sized down 2 sizes because I figure if I wear this wherever I go around aviation, he's right there with me. In fact, the pilot, Jeff Harris, who flew a P-38 in California, took this ring up with him on a flight to fly in the P-38 again.
Wow. Go back to the missions that, he overflew. I mean, you're supposed to fly, 100?
100.
And he got up to, 152?
152.
So he must have shot down MiGs in those flights that he didn't fly, right?
Well,
right?
He didn't want to get sent home. And if he became an ace after 4, you get sent home with 5 and all the hoopla of a parade, and Daddy didn't want to have anything to do with that. He wanted to stay there and lead the guys home safely and continue to be a combat commander. And so he stopped shooting down the MiGs. He let the guys in his wing shoot down the MiGs. I do know there was also a tremendous bounty on his head. The North Vietnamese, I think it had at that time like $25,000, which was a big deal to capture him. And so he was also told by Washington, because of that bounty and his fame, you may not lead any more missions. You may not. He said, okay, that's fine. So what would he do? He'd fly in the back of the formation. still leading the mission, but not leading it. Figuratively, he knew how to stretch the words, stretch the definition. But I do know there was sighting by 2 people of his 5th MiG that he did shoot down. I've actually recorded the gentleman who saw that happen. They've tried to get it confirmed. You have to go through so much to get it confirmed. And I said, you know what, stop, let it be the myth that he only got 4, that he didn't want to come home. But he apparently did get number 5 and just was never reported or confirmed because he did not want to get sent home. He also told me, he said, honey, if I'd had a gun on that F4, I would have gotten 10. So,
John, how aware were you of these stories that we're hearing from Christina?
I can attest to one. He did not take the lead to fire on one mission because he had 4 already, and he'd said to his wingman, it's your turn. And the wingman pulled up, and he got the MiG. Oh. That was her dad's desire to give credit to the people who followed him. And he was he was a fighter pilot leader.
Looking back on the experience, John, now with the benefit of all these years since you came back from Vietnam, what's your feeling looking back over that experience personally and what it meant to you, and including how the war was prosecuted?
Well, it was a political war. We all knew as pilots and military there, we had all the equipment, the desire, and the ability to win. We were flying with hands tied behind our back. For instance, a MiG was only a threat after it's airborne. We could not strike MiGs on the ground. We would fly over airfields, we'd see the MiGs taxiing. We could not drop one bomb on a runway to deny them getting airborne. They were not a threat on the ground, politically. After they got airborne, yes, then we go after them. How weird is that?
There's a great myth that I've heard. I don't know if it's true, but it certainly sounds like a great Robin Olds myth. And people have come up to me and said, it's so neat. He used to do touch and goes on Hanoi airfield in that F4. He'd fly in and touch down on the runway and take off. Now, it sounds like something Robin would do, except I can't believe he would take that kind of risk. So I don't know if the truth will ever be known.
You're smiling, John. What are you smiling?
I don't know anything about that, but I wouldn't doubt it.
But looking back over the experience, John, what's it mean to you now that you were there?
Well, I feel that it was a waste of a lot of lives, unfortunately. And I can give you one case in point. A lot of the missions were directed from the White House personally, either by the president or one of his chiefs of staffs. Not the military, but the civilian. We would get those orders, and Robin would always say, we're not going to do that because there's nothing to gain, but there's attrition we cannot accept. We'll put that as number 2 or number 3. And so the primary mission would be what we thought would be good. There was a general sent over, a 1-star general came in. I happened to be in that briefing that morning, and the mission was, this was a primary target, here's a secondary. He didn't mention anything after the primary and secondary. The general stood up and said, Major, who was the briefing officer at that time, Major, what happened to mission da-da-da-da directed by the White House? The major looked at him. This is Major Moore, by the way. His dad was a 2-star general, and Major Moore became chief of the Thunderbirds, or the lead of the Thunderbirds later. But Major Moore looked at the general and he said, General, and he quoted a general's order or motto in World War II, I will never send my men where I won't lead them. And he said, General, I have a back seat in the F4, and if you want us to strike that mission, you be the leader, you fly in my back seat, and we'll hit it. That general sat down, and we never heard another tone from him.
Wow. Now, what's that hat? Oh, that's your hat.
My dad's hat.
Yeah, stay out of the sun.
So I've got my dad's Wolfpack hat on. Very cool thing is right before Bolo mission took off, as a result of Hub Zemke being his commander in England in World War II, when the pilots were ready to go for Operation Bolo, Robin said, go get 'em, Wolfpack. And that's when the 8th Fighter Wing became the Wolfpack. And to this day, it's the Wolfpack. The 8th moved from Uban in the late 70s up to Kunsan, South Korea. I was there in April. They invited me over to rename a street, Olds Avenue. The entire base is the wolf pack. All the airplanes have WP and the symbol of the wolf on the tail. Everything on that base is about Robin's wolf pack, and the pride is enormous, and I am so proud of those youngsters and happy for my dad that his legacy and his spirit and his style of command and is going on to this day to that extent in that very serious mission that they are having over there to protect South Korea.
I wonder how many, in this case, commanding officers at his level, if anyone else in the history of our military has had that kind of long playing influence because of the power of their leadership.
Well, certainly there are names, Hap Arnold and Tui Spots and Curtis LeMay, and there are definitely leaders out there. But as far as existing today, when I travel around, the greatest joy for me is all the young active duty pilots in the Air Force and the Navy, Marines, Robin Olds is their spirit animal. That's the best way to put it. He is their renegade leader. He's their sort of underground leader to give them to heighten their morale and let them know that they can push the bounds, push the limits, push the envelope of their jobs and have fun at the same time. It's really quite remarkable. In fact, what's amazing to me is there are now 5 aircraft with his name on it. This beautiful Scat-3, the P-38. There are 2 Mustangs, Scat-6. Scat-7 is in Belgium, flying around Europe. His Scat-27 F-4 that he shot down 2 MiGs in is in the Air Force Museum in Dayton. It's sitting in splendor. The QF-4 Scat-27 was going to fly in yesterday from Holloman, but they couldn't get it started yesterday morning, so they flew in this wonderful bird. So it's amazing to me that there are 5 aircraft that are flying aircraft with his name on it. And there's no greater honor for my dad. He's still flying.
Danny Bolin, are you there, Danny? Danny Bolin, you got a microphone?
Present, sir.
We have some time for some questions from all of you, and the hands are going up. Danny, here's number 1 over here.
Oh, Scat. So at West Point, his roommate's name was Scat Davis.
Question.
And Scat desperately wanted to fly, but he washed out of pilot training because he was colorblind and he was heartbroken. And so my dad told him, he said, "Don't worry, I'm going to take you flying with me my entire career." So he named all of his aircraft Scat, Scat-1 through Scat-27, which is what's in the museum.
I understand in World War II he made a mission where he lost the rest of his unit in the weather and they turned back and he went on and dropped his bombs anyway. He figured he was there, he might as well drop them.
Yeah, that happened several times. He would find himself either alone or with his wingmen separated from his group for whatever reason, and they would go and take on, I think there was one point they took on 50 Germans on their own, shot down 2 of them. He was always looking for an opportunity to do things like that.
Sir.
Christine, I had the chance to meet your father and interview him several years ago. He told a story flying the P-38. He was flying along and one of his buddies was being attacked by a German. He was in the P-38. He immediately turned and went straight down, and there was the problem of compressibility. He lost his canopy that day. Would you tell that story, please?
Right. The canopy blew off. The P-38 is known, and the Fagans can talk about this more, for its compressibility problem. But he had also forgotten to switch the fuel tanks over, and its engine quit. And so as he was going down after the German, his engine quit on the right side, and then the left one quit, but he fired anyway, and the German went down. Daddy went down. He restarted about 50 feet above the ground.
Whoa. Dan, question.
Yeah, I got an Aussie here.
Good.
Not quite right. I'm actually a Kiwi living in Australia.
I like Kiwis.
I do too. You're a very lucky lady. Your dad was a remarkable man, and even over down under, we've heard all about him. And I read stories about his World War II and Vietnam experiences. You said something earlier which I thought could be quite amusing and entertaining for us in a later volume. When you finished your grandfather's biography, have you considered writing another volume about all those interesting bits you had to leave out of the first
Oh,
book.
yes. Oh, yes. Well, one of the things I'd like to do is with all his drawings, it's a perfect opportunity to intersperse those crazy drawings with the funny stories I had to leave out. And there are so many stories that have been told to me from people. For instance, I had over 24 stories from the Air Force Academy, and I could only put 4 in the book. There are many, many examples of great stories about him that I intend to publish along with those drawings.
Question, sir.
Yeah, I'm very curious about what it is that turns a person into a man like your father, what makes him a great leader. And I'm particularly interested in how much of an influence his own father was in that relationship.
His own father was a tremendous influence, and also my dad's mother died when he was only 4 years old. So my grandfather remarried, but Robin was basically raised by Robert and Robert's cronies. And in that house, when he was growing up in Langley, you know, Eddie Rickenbacker, Elliot White Springs, Hap Arnold, Tui Spots, all these amazing, amazing pilots were in that house all the time. So this young boy got to listen to these fighter pilots talking down in the living room about the importance of air power. He also got to watch how his father treated people and treated the men that worked for him. And so it was very much an influence that way. But a lot of people have also said, you know, there's a debate of if you're not a natural-born leader, can you really become a leader? And I tend to think that that may be true to a certain extent. You can learn how to talk, you can learn how to do certain things. But if it's not innate within you to like people and to be a natural leader, it's not something that is easily learned. And he was a natural leader. When he was in high school, he was elected president of his class 3 years in a row, and he never ran. He never wanted to be president. He was captain of the football team without being asked to be captain. He was just that kind of person. And growing up with him as a dad, I can tell you that I absolutely understand why his men trusted him and followed him into combat without question, because as a father, he was that way to me as well. So just a tremendous natural leader.
Any other questions? Sir, would you step up, please? Turn around the camera. Your name, sir?
John Schelk. I was at UBAN, a little after then Colonel Olds. By the way, can I have the people that from UBAN stand up?
Sure.
Everyone here that was at UBAN with me, with Colonel Olds, all of us, would you please stand up? There's a few of us here.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Woo.
Wow.
Wow, that's so great.
And by the way, to keep that going, would all veterans stand up right now,
Yes,
please?
please.
All veterans. Yeah.
All right, one other thing. For those of you in the military, police, fire departments, you recognize these. They're called challenge coins. We carry them to commemorate our history with a particular unit. Some of us from UBAN got together. This is a special one. Christina?
Oh, thank you.
Congratulations.
Wow.
That's yours.
Oh, thank you. That's
Your
so
friend
cool.
James Helms and I have been working on this
Yes,
behind the scenes.
you have. Oh, wow. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, John Quire and Christina Olds.
Remember, we're going to start here at the nose, and I'm an FAA guy, and I'm giving you a check ride. So, tell me about the airplane.
Well, when you're looking here, you're looking for normal strut extension, which a lot of times at first it's going to be a little higher than normal, but you're looking for about a fist. Once you get in and start up, it'll get down to that. You're looking for any normal unusual wear and tear on the tire. On your arms here, you're looking for any cracks, making sure there's no wear on that or hairline cracks. You're looking in your wheel well. There's a lot of hydraulic and lines in there. You're looking for leaks. You're looking for making sure all your nuts are in, cotter pins are in. There's a lot of linkage and stuff. You want to make sure everything is where it's supposed to be. Just making sure the nose wheel's secure and the gear door is good and tight, and making sure all of your nuts and your cotter pins and everything are secure to the door.
Tell us a little bit about the armor.
Yeah, you had 4 50 caliber machine guns and a 20 millimeter cannon. So these things packed quite a bit of power out of the nose, and these things held the ammo right in between there, right behind on this panel here, and they could pack a punch. So they had a lot of ammo.
Going on down.
Yep, going on through here. Of course, you drain your fuel sumps. There's fuel sumps you drain. Make sure you don't have any water or particles in your fuel. So you take and drain your fuel sumps, and again, check your door. And over here, as we start on the right nacelle, you're looking again your strut extension, making sure there's no cracks in your gear at all, making sure all your connections are good and sound, making sure your gear door fairings are tight, looking for the nuts and the cotter pins. You're checking your coolant doors, making sure they're attached, your linkages are good, and that there's nothing missing. The oil coolant doors are electrical, your coolant or hydraulic. So you just want to make sure everything's connected and working good.
What
there.
is the power plant?
It's a V1710 Allison 1200 horse. And of course, it's got 2 engines. Wartime takeoff power was 1475. And they hold 13 gallons of oil and lots of fuel.
Okay. Obviously, liquid cooled, and that's your scoop back there.
Yep, that's your coolant radiators.
How many tanks do you have? Fuel tanks?
You have 3 fuel tanks in each wing, not counting your drops. Your inboards, your mains, 93. Then you have 60 in reserve and 55 in the outer wing. Yep.
With your drop tanks, you got plenty of fuel.
The drop tanks, you have well over 1,000 gallons.
Okay, now the props are kind of unique here.
Yeah, your props are unique. They're Curtis Electric props, and obviously when you're doing the walk around, you're checking for any dings or anything unusual with the prop. But they're Curtis Electric props, so they're not like your hydromatic propellers. And in the airplane, you have right when you start up, part of your checklist is to make sure all the circuit breakers are in, because like a P-40, it's got the electric prop, and they're somewhat prone to failure. So you really got to make sure you're watching the electric prop.
So the electric prop wasn't as reliable as a hydraulic prop?
That's what I've heard. I've never personally had a failure, but we've had a failure on this airplane, and we have on a P-40. And then you have a fixed pitch lever where you decrease and decrease manually with a toggle switch, and it's sensitive, but it works good to get you home. And then your glycol tank is right there, and your oil cooler. And you're checking the leading edge for any, I guess, deformities or anything that you may have hit. Your nav lights, carburetor air.
Okay.
And then these have the Fowler type flaps. So once you're in the airplane, you really can't see them. There's really not much you can do other than just kind of look and make sure there's, everything looks okay. And your ailerons, check those out. Your flight controls, make sure there's nothing unusual about those. Coming back, making sure there's nothing inside the air scoop. Garbage or whatever. And then coming back here to your rudders, 2 rudders, and just making sure movement's free, your trim tab. And then you have your elevator back here with your trim tab, and making sure your controls are free, just kind of looking to make sure nothing looks abnormal. Big elevator.
Story behind the ballast on here?
Well, from what I understand, they were put on to prevent compressibility when they went into their dives. A lot of the guys couldn't pull out, but it turns out from what I was told, that those were not the answer. They kept putting them on because they were in production, but it's the fillet outside of the cockpit that actually prevented the compressibility. But they kept putting these on because they're in production.
I'd understood that the Army
breaks up the airflow.
The Army required it, even though it was not required. They put it on. Kelly Johnson said that the fillet did the job, but
Yep.
they required it anyway.
That's correct. They kept putting it on, but they figured the fillet by the cockpit was the ticket. And then, of course, you continue your walk around. You go over to the left nacelle and do the same checks, and then you would go up on top and do your cockpit check, and you're ready to get in there and do your pre-flight for the cockpit.
Okay, Kevin, let's talk about the nose art for a little bit.
Yes.
Why did Robin name this airplane Scat anyway?
He named his airplane Scat because one of his best friends was not able to get into the military, and that was his way, from what I understand, reading his book, of getting his friend involved since he couldn't get in the military because he had medical conditions.
And so this Scat name, it was used all the way through Vietnam, is that correct?
All the way through Vietnam. It was on his Phantom, and it was on his P-38, his Mustang. And the neat thing about Scat 3 is he became an ace in this airplane, shot his 5th airplane down in this. So the P-38 has significance in respect to that. And he had a lot of amazing stories in the P-38. Like I said, I believe it was 2 airplanes. He shot down 2 airplanes with no engines running because when they dropped their drop tanks, he didn't switch his tanks and ran out, but he still shot them down. So pretty neat story.
Which is in his diary.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you.